What's up, everybody? I realize I'm a couple of years late to the party, but better late than never, I guess. I'm going to react to the debate between the cosmic skeptic and inspiring philosophy entitled The Moral Argument. If you like the kind of work that I do here, do consider supporting my demonetized channel. Links to all of that in the description. Pinned comment. At any rate, I'm only really gonna talk about the first part of the debate, which ended up being something like 3/4 thereof. And that is because it was, and as it often is, between atheists and theists, a sticking point. A very sticking point. And that is this whole debate of objective versus subjective morality, right? A point which they couldn't really get past, in my opinion, because of Alex's inability to be intellectually honest. Now, I understand that that's not very kind or nice, if you will, to someone like Alex, but look, man, I'm not going to beat around the bush. The kid is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that's that, okay? And so much as he claims to want to be honest and professes that in a lot of these debates professes that, you know, he has a great hope or some shit like that, that he could be convinced to becoming a Christian or start believing in God. Like he would be very, if you could provide him with evidence for this, he would be like very happy and grateful. All of that is bullshit, man. Don't believe the hype. My opinion, okay? You don't like it? What do I care, right? At any rate, without talking about what the title is really about, the moral argument, which I will say briefly is seems like a valid argument to me. Let's talk about subjective and objective morality or this debate as it happened between these two guys. So basically, as I understand it, one argument for objective morality from IP was this fact that we all seem to recognize that it is what it is, right? Intuitively, well, we all basically agree that these certain things, and I'm just talking about the big stuff, right? Not these little day-to-day qualms or arguments, if you will, that really deal with what I consider to be ethics, not morality, right? Like ethics within any particular field of, I don't know, like the criminal justice system or medicine, right? I don't consider most of that to fall under the purview of morality, but it's really more pragmatic ethical rules that we kind of make up to navigate the world, right? So while that's completely subjective, these ethics, and I understand that mainstream philosophy doesn't they make this distinction, but it's interpreted differently. It is what it is, right? I'm not mainstream, nor am I a philosopher. But to me, morality is basically the distinction between, well, what's good and what's bad insofar as our behavior, right? So the sort of argument that IP presents is that, well, we all seem to recognize that there is this thing such as objective morality, because when it comes to the big stuff, right, like rape, murder, so on and so forth, I mean, we basically agree. We seem to have this internal compass. And look, maybe these aren't the words that he used in this debate, but this is oftentimes how this is talked about, right? We all seem to have this internal compass, and we all basically agree that these things are wrong, and that's that, right? So what the claim here is that, as I see it anyway, is that not that we make this up subjectively is that we subjectively recognize that this is how it is objectively, right? So even though you may not be able to quite put your finger on it, like we just agree that these things, and we can't really explain them necessarily. This is how it is, and we just feel it, right? That this is just wrong. These things are wrong. We understand that, right? So it's basically our intuition guiding our moral behavior. And just, look, just because there are some people out there who do evil, well, that doesn't mean A, that they don't recognize that they're doing evil, and most of them I would say probably do, or B, that doesn't mean that they're not mentally ill or possessed by the devil to do evil things and not realize that what they do is evil, right? That doesn't, just because people act in immoral ways, that doesn't debunk objective morality. If anything, it substantiates it. And as I stated in another video, you can't even, if you don't agree that morality is objective, right, then morality doesn't exist, period. It's like truth. If you don't believe truth is objective, then there is no truth, right? There can be no truth. So just simply saying that morality exists, or what is good or what is bad, we know, we could recognize that these things are good and those things are bad. Just to say that it exists, you're basically saying that it's objective. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something here, you let me know. But I've talked about that in other videos. But basically, and there are other arguments for why morality is objective, but this is one of them, is that intuitively we recognize that it exists, period. Whether you're atheist, deist, theist, whatever, we all basically recognize that objective morality exists. It would seem that certain things are objectively wrong, period. No matter what culture you come from, you know, insofar as you're a human being and you have some kind of a moral compass, these are the things we agree on, period. So intuitively, it would seem morality is objective. Now, I'm not saying that that's an irrefutable argument or that it's ironclad and it's just one of them, right? But, okay. But it's an argument, right? If you have a problem with that, tell us why, right? Give us a counter argument. Tell me why my intuition is wrong. And they bring up this example of people looking at planet Earth, you know, back in the day, just living on planet Earth without, you know, the advancements of science, telescopes, or all these other instruments we have that allow us to measure the universe around us. People looked at the world and they said it was flat, right? I mean, did that really happen? Let's be honest. Is that what really happened? Because there's a theory out there that this was just a psyop for all the seafaring cultures to have monopoly on the new world, right? Oh, don't go sailing in that direction. You're gonna fall off the edge of the earth and gonna get eaten by a big sea monster, right? That sort of shit. There's a pretty good argument to be made that was just a psyop, right? That the earth was some kind of a disc you could like sail off of and fall into nothingness or something like that. But for like just a regular person living, they didn't even have a concept of the planet being or the earth being something floating around in space maybe. They just looked at it. It looked pretty flat to them, apart from, you know, those bumps we call mountains and the divots we call valleys. It just looked what it was, right? Were they wrong? Well, not really. Insofar as they didn't conceive of it as bigger than what they can see, their intuition was absolutely correct. But okay, fine. If you want to take a more holistic view, now that we've explored Earth and we've been able to measure it with all these new tools that we have, fine. Our concept has changed. So I don't I don't know that those people's intuitions were necessarily wrong, but if those intuitions informed some idea of planet Earth, or this rock that we're on, as I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, as some kind of a finite, right? Some kind of a finite thing out there in space, and you still said it was flat, then okay, maybe your intuition was wrong. Again, a lot of people disagree with that. I really take no position because it doesn't matter to me. But let's just, for the sake of the argument, accept that we live on a globe and your intuition was wrong. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Even though I think it's a weak example of that, but there are perhaps other instances of our intuition being wrong. Fair enough. But in order to prove that our intuition was wrong, well, you had to provide arguments, right? And then we, as honest people, if we accept your arguments, we changed our mind about that, right? So what inspiring philosophy is saying, this is my intuition, it's your intuition, it's everybody else's intuition. Tell us why it's wrong. And the only argument that Cosmic Skeptic has been able to muster is that, well, intuition is sometimes wrong. Yeah, but by that same token, intuition is sometimes right. So it's really not an argument, right? Why is his intuition, all of our intuitions, our collective intuition about what seems like objective morality, why are we wrong? He couldn't provide an argument for this specific case, right? So even though inspiring philosophy's argument may not have been super strong or ironclad, at least he has an argument, and it's a reasonable argument, right? And if you cannot debunk that, then intellectual honesty would require you to accept it, if only for the time being. Something that Cosmic Skeptic has a very difficult time doing, because in my opinion, yet again, he's not an intellectually honest person. Because look at it like this. If objective morality is a concept, right? It's not material. It's outside of the natural world, right? I don't know if you could necessarily say it's supernatural, because what is that anyway, right? Like, it's kind of hard to define anyway, but it's immaterial. Let's just put it that way, right? Well, I mean, so is truth and logic, right? Does truth exist? Does logic exist? Cosmic Skeptic, I mean, he's in a logical debate trying to get to the bottom of things, right? So obviously he accepts logic and truth. And I don't know what his stance is for justifying that as a skeptic, who in this same debate said that as skeptics, we don't take anything for granted. Well, hold on a minute. If that's your argument against objective morality, then how are you taking truth and logic for granted? Right? What's your justification for that? The only justification I ever heard from an atheist or a skeptic, well, we use truth and logic, we accept it because it works, right? That's the only justification. Look, if there are other arguments for truth and logic from the atheistic point of view, you let me know. You point me in that direction. But ultimately, the only argument that I've seen is, I accept it because it works, right? Intuition, buddy. So you call yourself a skeptic, and yet you accept truth and logic based merely on an intuition. And yet when it comes to a very similar concept, it's in the same realm, right? Objective morality, moral truth, right? There's truth right there. You accept that good and bad exist, right? You accept that truth exists. And yet moral truth doesn't exist, even though intuitively we feel it does. We see it. Just the same, exactly same way we see truth and logic. We may not be able, at least the atheists, we may not be able to substantiate it. We may not have a very good argument for it. It seems a little bit arbitrary to say, well, it works, it exists, we recognize it, right? We, quote unquote, see it. All right, great. But that's exactly the argument for why truth and logic exist. So how do you, on the one hand, accept truth and logic and then reject objective morality when they seem to be in that same realm with just as much or just as little evidence, right? He's completely hypocritical. This is the problem that I have with these skeptics. It's just a thinly veiled description of anti-theism. Okay, because if they have a different standard for theism, accepting theism and certain theistic concepts, right? Certain other ideas that are, it would seem, entailed in the view of theism, right? It seems like they reject those concepts because they are quote unquote theist, more so than the other way around. And then they try to reverse engineer an explanation for why that is, which turns out to be completely hypocritical and incoherent, because yet again, how do you accept truth and logic and not objective morality when the proof, quote unquote proof, whatever you define that to be, the evidence for both or all three is exactly the same. The justification is the same. It's kind of intuitive, right? At least from your atheistic point of view. How are you so skeptical of religious concepts or concepts that are entailed in religion, such as free will, for example, or objective morality? How are you skeptical of those and not truth and logic, which are also entailed in theistic worldview, the theist worldview, but also yours? So you cherry pick. Your worldview is incoherent. Yet again, the atheist worldview proves itself to be incoherent and seems to have a double standard for what it accepts and what it does not. And the reason, it would seem, what it accepts and what it does not accept has nothing to do with any kind of a standard, but has everything to do with whether it's entailed in, let's say in this case, the Christian view or not, right? So clearly, atheists are telling on themselves yet again, right? They're not really, it seems to me like they're reverse engineering their explanations for certain things based on the fact that this is considered to be a theist belief, and this other belief fits well within the naturalistic, atheistic kind of worldview. So we'll accept that on those grounds, and then we'll find reasons to explain, right? They're not getting to the truth by using the same methodology insofar as accepting these these concepts, insofar as debating these concepts. They have a different standard for certain things that are considered theistic and other things that they think fit within their naturalist worldview, right? Because yet again, if the evidence for truth and logic is basically, or your justification is basically the same as objective morality, and you reject it because we're talking about objective morality, and yet you accept it because we're talking about truth and logic, which you need to be able to reject anything, right? You know, you're a complete hypocrite. Your worldview is incoherent. And that's the problem with this atheist worldview. He says, in this very debate, he says, we don't take anything for granted, right? As an argument against objective morality. And yet he takes truth and logic for granted, right? So when I keep hearing this assertion that this larger, I'm not saying that this Christian or Muslim did not lose a debate against this or that atheist, right? But when we're talking about the broad debate, when we take all the arguments made and we weigh them against one another, atheism it cannot even prove that it's coherent, internally coherent. Atheists are incoherent, right? Just because you appeal to people's emotions better in this or that debate, or you're faced against some Christian who, you know, maybe themselves is incoherent or is making bad points, just because this or that guy could get the best out of some other guy. When you look at the debate that's been going on as a whole, I'm sorry, but theism has been destroying atheism for a very, very long time. Atheism cannot even show that it's internally coherent, right? Which should disqualify it from any debate, because if you cannot, by your own standards, you cannot even justify truth or logic. What are you doing in a logical debate? that entails truth. What are you doing? Right? But because you do accept these concepts, you should, in order to be internally coherent, you should accept objective morality, unless you could show us why it's inconsistent or maybe incoherent or why it's wrong, right? You need to provide an argument because you accept intuition, but only when it comes to truth and logic, not objective morality. Then intuition all of a sudden doesn't work. You're incoherent. Your worldview is just, it's in shambles. It's a shitty worldview. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? Like, you got to do better than that, guys. Which doesn't automatically say that a Christian or just a theist or a deist is correct, right? But if any one of these two is more likely, well, yours cannot be correct, period. So just by default, the other worldview is more plausible, or at the very least, it's internally coherent and it's consistent. At the very least, it could still ultimately be wrong, but hey, isn't it your job to prove that? And how can you prove that when you yourself reject logic and truth, pretending that you don't? You don't make any sense, okay? Atheism is dead, guys. The only way that it's been able to stay alive is because these people don't accept logical arguments. They keep rehashing the same shit that's been debunked hundreds of years ago, even from what I hear, right? And they're able to appeal to some kind of like angsty young person whose worldview isn't at all coherent either, or very well developed to begin with. Maybe they don't even have a worldview. The only way atheists are able to appeal to a lot of these people is because, let's keep it real, the church, if we are to talk about Christianity, the church has fucked up, okay? And hasn't done its job educating the young and maybe getting them interested in the truth of, theism in general by using reason and logic and these sort of philosophical debates, questions, this sort of philosophical thought, but instead has just been basically trying to drill, hashtag not all, but like drill religion and brainwash people with religion when it has so much more at its disposal to be able to convince people of the truth of theism, right? Not to say they get everything right, but I mean, if any worldview is coherent and better explains the world that we live in, obviously it's theism. Obviously. So again, for people to continually bring up this idea that somehow atheists have won the debate already, like, what are you talking about? You don't make sense. Anyway, that's my review of the debate. Not to say that I haven't made any mistakes, but that's the debate insofar as I see it. You may not like IP's argument, okay? But he presented an argument that wasn't debunked at all, wasn't even challenged, really. While at the same time, that same sort of argument works for Alex when it comes to truth and logic. All of a sudden, when it comes to, well, let's keep it real, God, all of a sudden, that argument somehow doesn't work for him. The fuck out of here, man. Thanks for watching.